spend in a miserable way.
U.S. News: McConnell privately cautions Trump about emergency declaration on border walls. Washin. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell cautioned President Trump privately this week about the consequences of declaring a national emergency to build his border wall, telling him the move could trigger political blowback and divide the GOP, according to two Republicans with knowledge of the exchange. McConnell Kentucky told Trump that McConnell delivered the message during a face-to-face meeting with the president Tuesday at the White House, according to the Republicans, who requested anonymity to describe the encounter. The two men met alone. The majority leader's comments to the president came amid rising GOP concerns over the fallout if Trump were to declare a national emergency that would allow him to circumvent Congress and use the military to build new stretches of wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. Trump hears the possibility of making a definitive statement on the topic during his State of the Union address, telling reporters to watch the Tuesday speech closely. "I think you'll find it," and Trump again dismissed chances that he'll get the $5.7 billion in war funding he wants from a bipartisan congressional committee charged with producing a border security solution that could forestall another government shutdown. The committee's work, if the stopgap measure expires with no agreement, large portions of the federal government that reopened January 25 after a record-long funding lapse would shut down again. "We will be looking at a national emergency because I don't think anything's going to happen," Trump told reporters at the White House. "I don't think The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comment on the meeting between McConnell and Trump. McConnell spoke. On the same day he met with the president, McConnell publicly announced his opposition to a national emergency declaration as he encouraged the 17-member congressional committee to find another way out of the impasse. "I am for whatever," McConnell's top deputy, Senior John Boone. The prospect of Trump using a national emergency declaration to build his wall has divided Republicans, with a number of them expressing concerns about the precedent that such a move would set. Senior John asked, "We've certainly tried to communicate that to him," said Curry, referring to Trump. "And so, other Republican senators took a different view. President Trump proposed logical solutions," said Senior. Rick Scott asked, "Lawmakers of both parties expect that a national emergency declaration would be immediately challenged in court and would end up languishing in legal proceedings without producing quick action on the border wall that Trump long promised Mexico would pay for?" And a growing concern for Republicans, which McConnell voiced to Trump at the White House, is that they would be forced to vote on a disapproval resolution aimed at overturning the declaration, and that the resolution would pass. That would take place under provisions of the National Emergencies Act, which provides that a presidential declaration can be terminated if lawmakers pass a joint resolution to do so. House Democrats, at least a half-dozen Republican senators, are fiercely opposed to the idea of an emergency declaration, generating enough opposition that a disapproval resolution could pass the Senate with the support of the 47 Democrats and a handful of GOP senators. The scenario about which McConnell warned Trump. Republicans, a disapproval resolution on a presidential emergency declaration is rare, so exactly how the process would play out is uncertain. But it could expose an emergency declaration would also risk further political damage to Trump, whose disapproval rating rose significantly over the 35-day partial government shutdown as more Americans faulted the president and Democrats for the standoff. While Trump stood on weak political ground demanding a wall that most Americans continue to oppose, an even larger majority opposes Trump's declaring a national emergency to build it. The Washington Post ABC News poll during the shutdown found 66% of Americans opposed Trump's using emergency powers to build the wall without approval from Congress, 12 percentage points higher than opposition to the wall in general. 7 in 10 Trump is pitted between the political middle and his own base, which has embraced his demand for a border wall. While Republicans, facing a deadline for a compromise, House Republicans on the conference committee plan to travel to the border Sunday and Monday. The Oval Office discussion over a national emergency declaration illustrated the dynamic that has developed between Trump and McConnell. The two speak free, but even as they have kept in touch privately, in public their strategies have diverged. Although McConnell has, I think some of their goals are aligned, but the methods to get there might be different, said Sr. Richard C. Shelby, Josh Dorsey, Damian Pallitter, Scott Clements and John Wagner contributed to this report. You are now subscribed to. Please enter a valid email address. You might also like.
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.